Hello and a warm welcome to the Feed ZW. My name is Lynette Manzini. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We are continuing with our conversation on the just energy transition. We remember African countries and other countries are actually using fossil fuels, and there is an urgent need for us to transition to renewable energy. We spoke about this in our last program where where issues around the transition was discussed. Today we want to talk about the just energy transition. What are the socio-economic costs for young people? We want to transition, but obviously there are benefits, but we first of all want to look at the cost. Joining me in today's program is John Maketo, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development Programs Manager. Welcome to the program, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. How was the alternative mining endeavor?
Well, engaging as usual. Great opportunity for, sharing ideas around the extractive industries. Issues you're talking about, just transition and so forth.
Interesting. Let's get right into it. So we are talking about the just energy transition, and we want to look at the socio-economic implications of this. We're saying this is where every country should be. We should move away from fuels that emit greenhouse gas emissions. Why are we doing this? Because we want to mitigate the effects of climate change. But transitioning seems to have social and economic. Maybe we can start with the social implications of this transition.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So the transitioning from fossil fuels to greener, smarter, cleaner energy, it's already a reality. It's a call that's being made worldwide. And yes, you're talking about the social costs for that transitioning. And I would start by saying that the cost implications in social terms, they cannot be viewed in a homogeneous way. They're going to affect people of different classes, people of different age groups, people of different sexes differently at varying levels. The cost and the pain will be felt differently. Definitely those that have the means, they'll be able to cushion themselves much better, much quicker, and transition faster. So I just wanted to underline that the transition is not going to happen in a blanket-some way, wholesomely together for everyone, and the pain felt is going to be differently felt. Social groups that are more vulnerable, that are marginalized, that have got limited access to economic opportunities, economic resources, for example, they are going to feel much pain because they are going to be told that you cannot use wood as a source of fuel. Imagine you're in the rural areas and wood is almost the only option that you have. The alternatives are very expensive and beyond their reach. Women in rural areas, limited source of income, even to buy gas or even consider other alternatives. It's very expensive for those, and it may also mean a lot in terms of sacrificing the wishes, the options for other age groups like young people and so forth. So definitely the transition to cleaner energy is going to have some implications.
Some social, economic. What about the economic costs? I know you spoke about moving from wood, because wood is something that you just go into the forest and you chop your wood, you come back and you use. But let's talk about our coal-powered thermal power stations. We have infrastructure already, and we are going to forgo this infrastructure. Obviously, it's not on the click of a button all at once. What are the costs involved? Can we afford that in Zimbabwe?
Okay, so the social and economic costs are actually tied together. So let's take a classic case here. We've got women probably employed. We've got men employed in a thermal power station, Wange, just as an example. Shutting down Wange thermal power stations means loss of jobs for young people. It means loss of jobs for breadwinners in families. And in such a case, where there is loss of employment, the heavily affected are the women. Why? They are the greatest caregivers. And it means more burden on the caregivers as compared to men. The men, they are doing less care work. So already we are giving more burden to women. We are placing a huge burden on young people, on missed out opportunities. The other social cost is that if there is limited employment opportunities as a result of the transition, we're going to see a lot of young people involved in juvenile delinquencies, drug abuse, and so forth. And then also in terms, you evaluated the economic cost. Can we afford that? At the present moment, I'll categorically say that no, for Zimbabwe. We cannot transition on our own. I'll add that. We need to be talking about climate financing. We need to be talking about the climate justice from a perspective of the financing of that transition. We need to be looking at the biggest polluters, contributing to the transitioning process. How do we cushion the affected communities when we transition to cleaner energy? Because definitely cleaner energy means less human resources, more machined or automated work. So it's definitely loss of employment opportunities. And so those are some of the economic costs. And definitely we're going to have some communities turned into ghost towns. Communities that are completely reliant and dependent on mining of fossil fuels. Core towns like Wange, for example, if coal is banned worldwide, that's going to turn into a ghost town. We have had such cases in Zimbabwe. Shabani Mashaba mine turned into a ghost town, ghost mine overnight because of the downgrading of asbestos, use of asbestos. So definitely the costs are there for everyone to see.
The costs are there for everybody to see. You spoke about climate financing, and you say that the biggest polluters should finance this transition, which is justified. But at the moment, there's nothing in that. No resources have been pulled together. Don't you think that African countries like Zimbabwe should also look at domestic funding to ensure, because at the end of the day, we are doing it for ourselves?
Yeah, I want to agree with you. I'm not saying that African governments should be reluctant about this and wait for a savior to come from somewhere. But you want to look at this again. African governments are already shouldering a huge burden. Sub-Saharan Africa shelters highest population living under poverty. It houses the largest populations in the world, with unemployment, highest unemployment rates. You find them in Sub-Saharan Africa. You are looking at diseases and pandemics heavily, giving a heavy blow in Sub-Saharan Africa. HIV/AIDS, now COVID-19 pandemic, many other things, climate change disasters, the cyclones, and so forth. And
yet we are the lowest emitters.
We are the lowest emitters. So what we're talking about here is simply, and on top of that, these same countries are saddled with a heavy debt burden. They are owing, Western countries, Eastern countries, huge external debts, and they have to repay. So over all these problems, the poverty and so forth, there is now the issue of climate change, climate transition. And why do we talk about climate financing and climate justice? The transition cannot happen without a facilitation and support of the Western world. It's an ethical core. It's a moral core. Western countries, let's admit it, at some point they thrived. They developed their economies using these very fossil fuels that we are now condemning. The railway system in the Western world was developed using coal, as a powering fuel, and they improved until they're now using electricity-powered railway systems. We are just at the first initial stages, and boom, they are we're talking about banning fossil fuels. How do we go further? And most importantly, the resources being used to develop the Western world, they were being taken from the third world countries. They were coming right from here. Coal from Zimbabwe helped to develop the Western world. And there has not been compensation through all the periods, or the dark periods of slavery, the dark periods of colonialism. We are not talking about compensation for all those dark periods, but we're saying let's have some justice and equity when we are talking about the development discourse. Yeah.
But you have, the northern countries have committed to this fund?
Some countries have made a commitment, some have been wavering around those commitments. We're not even talking about commitment to financing, but just committing to reducing carbon emission. There is no common agreement in countries in the Western world.
So just hold on. In case you're just joining us, you are tuned into the Feed ZW. My name is Lynette Manzini. The program is Green Spaces, and we are continuing with the conversation on the just energy transition. And in studio with me today is John Maketo, the Zimbabwe Programs Manager. John, I was going to ask you the next question, but I've already seen that you have already responded to it. And I wanted to find out, some of the sources. How are we going to make sure that these renewable sources are available to low-income communities? And you said, the just climate justice, the climate financing is one port of call. But locally in Zimbabwe here, what do you think can be done?
We have to, like I highlighted earlier on, African governments, African people, we cannot be reluctant. We cannot resign to ourselves and wait for a savior. There has to be a lot of innovative thinking and deployment of ourselves to ensure that the transition is also a reality. So whether there is climate financing from anywhere in the world or not, the reality of climate change cannot be disputed. And we are at the receiving end. So definitely there has to be engagement in issues you've already highlighted. Domestic resource mobilization for one. Number two, innovation. A deliberate deployment of resources to develop science and technology so that we're able to harness some natural resources we already have. Zimbabwe, for example, enjoys significant amount of sunlight hours. We should be able to take advantage of that. We should, for me, when we're talking about domestic resource mobilization, I always want to highlight that curbing corruption is one of the ways we can mobilize and redeploy local resources. So we have to plug those leakages, use those resources internally, ensure that they are efficiently used to develop new sources of energy. You can imagine the Wikinochivayo case. If by then we had started to develop that was a step in the right direction by the government, directing resources towards development of renewable energies. But wow, it went the other way. We have nothing to show of it now. But we need more such projects that channel resources towards innovation and the development of renewable energy sources.
John, we are already thinking ahead. And the goal is to begin the transition. We don't know when it's going to begin, but what kind of policies can be implemented to ensure that the benefits of this transition are equitable?
Sure, definitely. Some of these policies, they would either sanction, some of them would incentivize people that are engaged in production of renewable resources as an incentive. Then you are allowing and motivating people that have got the means and ability to develop their own renewable energies. So, for example, we need to have government offering incentives to households that disengage themselves from the power line grid and totally rely on solar energy. You save the few resources we have, and then it means we burn less of coal.
So we're still using the coal, but using it effectively,
using
efficiently.
it effectively and at minimal level, and then also allowing gradual transition, allow people to move, put some incentives for people that have got the means to, you know, install either solar energy, to use drive electric vehicles. Then we've got less use of petrol and diesel and less carbon emission. So you are incentivizing people to move towards cleaner energy for different, and the incentives could be in the form of taxes. For example, if a company has put up solar power system in its complex, then you reduce their taxes by a given percentage. It's an incentive that can work in our favor for the greater good in the long run.
Initially, you spoke about the loss of jobs if we were to shut down the coal infrastructure in areas such as Hwange. But how can what kind of job opportunities exist in the renewable energy? And do you think that there are as many as there are in the fossil fuel industry?
Yeah, I do. It's just that our industry has not developed sufficient absorption capacity to take up young people in that field. But otherwise, there is massive opportunities for employment in the development of cleaner energy. Why not send our young people to study about converting solar energy into different kinds of energy that can be used domestically, commercially, deploy our young people to learn about production of batteries and so forth, so that we've got more plants producing batteries. The other thing I wanted to hazard about the transition, which at the present moment is not transition at all, because we're talking about, for example, lithium mining. For me, mining is mining. Mining is mining. As long as we have not discovered cleaner methods of extraction of underground resources, we'll still be polluting the air. So we are using dirty methods to extract a clean product to then produce clean energy.
So are you saying before we find these alternatives, we need to stop the mining?
Almost.
I like the way you took your breath.
Almost, because this is why I like, again, to be talking about climate justice. Who is doing lithium mining in Zimbabwe, Lynette? Who is doing lithium mining? Most Zimbabweans have no capacity or capital to engage in lithium mining or process it, value add it. No. Lithium mining is being done by foreign companies from China, Russia, Belarus, America, Britain, Russia, wherever. They extract the raw materials and take them. So for them, it's clean energy. But here it remains dirty energy because of the excesses and the negative impact it leaves on our environment. They're still polluting our air and everything else.
On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today.
Sure, thank you so much.
There you have it, viewers. That was John Maketo, the Zimcode Programs Officer, Zimcode Programs Manager. John, I'm taking away your title today.
Yes.
And he was helping us to get a better understanding of the just energy transition, and he is saying that there are a lot of socio-economic implications in transitioning, but it is important to ensure that the marginalized communities are cushioned from all these problems. So thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.